to this masterclass, which forms part of a series of events that celebrates the 60th anniversary of the Faculty of Social Sciences and highlights the importance of monitoring and evaluation to achieving sustainable development. I am Daisy Leslie, course coordinator of SALI 6023, monitoring and evaluation, one of a range of postgraduate courses delivered by the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies at the University of the West Indies, Mona campus. So today's master, Tarik Dixon, will be speaking to us on the subject of tackling the digital divide using spatial data. And so I will invite him to make his presentation, followed by 50 minutes of questions and answers when participants will be enabled to talk. However, during the presentation, you can use the Q&A feature. Before we jump into the presentation, allow me to tell you a little bit about Mr. Dixon. He is founder and president of the Commonwealth Scholarship Alumni Association of Jamaica, graduate of the University College London, where he studied spatial planning. Mr. Dixon is also a certified Geographic Information Systems professional, and he heads GIS network and design operations for the Digicel group. So Mr. Dixon, welcome and thank you for accepting the invitation at short notice to share with us today your wealth of knowledge. Over to you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Definitely appreciate the opportunity, and I'm certain this will be a mutual exchange because I'll extract value from the exchange. All right, so first, here to basically show you some insight as to how we use spatial and geospatial data to help connect the unconnected, right? Being cognizant of the forum and the audience, I saw a video which kind of spoke volume. I believe a video is worth 1,000,000 words. So I think that's a good juncture to start. So Richard, the video is a bit long, but I think it sets the context for what I will present. All right. Not sure if you can cue up the video for me, Richard.
Okay, will do. I'm going to stop your presentation and then share mine.
Sure, sure.
You need to know what's happening on the Earth in a spatially continuous way and how this varies over time. Both of those are provided by geospatial technologies.
When you're making decisions, you can't just take anecdotal information. You need quantified, explicit information which really will let you determine, is this bad or is it really bad, so that we don't over-respond and we don't ignore a real problem.
Maps bring knowledge, maps bring understanding. And the hope is that the knowledge and understanding bring better judgment.
I'm an earth scientist. I want to know how the Earth works. That's what mapping is ultimately telling us. Where things are, how they're related, how it's put together to tell us the story of what really is happening.
Geospatial technology is a fundamental tool if we hope to understand what's happening on the planet, especially in the study of climate, where we have data and we need to study many things simultaneously.
At NASA, we take geospatial data and observations of the Earth, like the vegetation index and rainfall and the observations of the atmosphere, and we incorporate them into models.
Suppose you've got a 2-mile thick, 1 continent wide piece of ice that's called Greenland. Is that ice getting bigger or smaller? What's happening? Satellites are watching how fast the ice goes over time, and you collect all these data sets and you slap them onto a map. And then you can start to say, this place is thickening, this place is thinning, this place is dumping icebergs faster.
So with repeated satellite data, you can tell, are things changing? And if they're changing, why are they changing?
We know that humans are changing the atmosphere. We know temperature is going up. How do we know if our CO2 is actually causing the warming? If you turn up the sun, you add energy everywhere and it warms everywhere. If you turn up CO2, it holds the heat down here, and way up there at the top of the stratosphere cools. The map of it is different. You can see it.
If we cut down forests, 200 or 300 years of carbon is then liberated to the atmosphere. By combining satellite data with data from lasers to tell the height, it's very easy to study deforestation from space.
As climate changes, we need to be able to know what the extent of those changes are. And only through looking through time can we determine how these things impact our day-to-day lives.
There are 1 billion hungry people in the world. Geospatial technology plays a crucial role in helping us make good decisions about where food aid goes, to whom it goes, and how much is sent.
When there's a food shortage, citizens become desperate to feed their families. When that sustenance is not provided, there's the potential of conflict. It can elevate to a military conflict, as well as increase potential terrorism. The Foreign Agriculture Service works hand in hand with our sister agencies, the State Department, USAID, FuseNet, NASA, to monitor crop production worldwide.
We linked satellite imagery with ground observations and rainfall data to determine the impact of drought on plant productivity.
And what we're talking about is photosynthesis. Green leaves absorb in the red and blue region of the spectrum very strongly, and more is reflected in the green. Satellite data shows quantitatively how much energy from the sun is being absorbed by green leaves.
We can then determine risk for food insecurity. We can watch the plants from space using the daily imagery as the growing season progresses. That's really important in places that we can't go to. In 2005, Zimbabwe, which had a lot of political issues, produced far less food than it usually did. On top of that came a drought. Something really needed to be done, but we didn't have any good ground information to know exactly how much assistance should be offered. Using the vegetation index and productivity in previous years, we were able to determine that food aid was really going to be needed for about 6 or 8 million people.
So we gave them enough advance notice to get foodstuffs imported and disseminated amongst the populace.
In the end, it's about people and the hunger of people on the ground, and what can we do to respond to that?
Interestingly enough, disease tracking has been in existence for hundreds of years. During the cholera outbreak in London in 1854, a doctor named John Snow started mapping out cholera deaths.
Cholera is a devastating disease. It can work amazingly fast. You can be well in the morning and you can be near death by the evening.
People didn't really know what was causing the death. And so he went around to every household and started to record how many deaths they had. And then they asked the people in the households where they got their drinking water. And in those days, the water all came from hand pumps. He started a map that said, here's the wells, here's the households where people were dying. Putting this representation down on a map is what I believe is a very interesting story.
You see this pattern of cholera death spreading out from the Broad Street pump.
He was able to show by the location of the deaths in relation to the water pump that it was almost certainly waterborne.
He went to the health board and said, we need to remove the pump handles. And sure enough, cholera deaths started to decline in these neighborhoods.
Snow was able to affect public policy by convincing people by the simple method of his map.
What John Snow did in 1854 still happens today. We're looking at the spread of all diseases around the world.
Hajj is a pilgrimage which Muslims make to Mecca. And it draws Muslims from 160 different countries.
3 million people from around the world come together in one spot. But in 2009, with the swine flu outbreak, the Ministry of Saudi Arabia was concerned.
There is no doubt that dealing with pilgrims from 160 countries and different health issues is going to be a challenge.
There are probably no other gatherings where crowd density can be quite so high for so long. Pilgrims are known as guests of God. The kingdom takes this very seriously. And so they could not issue emphatic bans or turn people away. Given the nature of the virus, this was one of the most dynamic public health challenges.
If you look at how disease spreads, place becomes extremely important. The CDC has a mission to look across the globe at disease prevention. We track the gamut of diseases, everything from Shigella to cancer to rabies to HIV.
The tracking of H1N1 is a powerful application of geospatial technology. Human beings get on planes and trains and automobiles and they cross boundaries. How do we record all these vectors that are carrying this virus?
Saudi Arabia wanted to say, hey, we're prepared for this during a pandemic. And so they asked for assistance on a real-time surveillance system.
They had healthcare workers meeting patients, and when they were swabbing individuals, they literally could enter the findings into a handheld smartphone.
They collect a GPS coordinate automatically with the survey instrument. When they would hit submit on the disease form, it would go back real-time to the Emergency Operations Center in Mecca. And they would see immediately that we have a certain number of influenza cases coming from Pakistan or from Indonesia. And so they could do something about it now. But then also they're able to assist their partner ministries with their population when they come back.
Now they're able to measure active disease in real time during Hajj. We were fearing very severe infection control impacts, but that did not come to pass. More than a solution to swine flu itself, those mechanisms of collaboration, sharing information, are going to serve the Hajj very well. And it's going to end up serving many corners of the planet well too.
One of the largest informal settlements in Africa is in Kenya, in the city of Nairobi, called Kibera. It's a very dense, very intense place.
Kibera is a slum that is comprising 13 villages. And in those 13 villages, we have 12 tribes.
If you look at maps from any existing source, Kibera is invisible, just a blank spot on the map.
It's kind of a fully functioning enclave, but it's simply not supposed to exist. It's seen as illegitimate.
The Kibera residents themselves have no public school, have no public health facility. The issue of sanitation is a serious problem.
We have hospitals in Kibera, but if you ask people in Kibera who live there, they don't know where those hospitals are.
So who's actually guiding that place? How is that place going to move forward?
When we first arrived in Kibera, we had no idea what the response would be.
We thought a bit naively, we'll spend a month or two in Kibera, and at the end we'd have a map and the community would celebrate.
But people are sometimes skeptical of new projects, data collection. This is why we didn't do it ourselves.
It was important for the people of Kibera to do the map themselves.
I personally never knew that there's something like a GPS.
We were mapping facilities that are important to the community. This included religious facilities, health facilities.
They were all very enthusiastic to participate in the project. But still, we would get a little bit of questioning from the neighbors.
Well, why are you making a map in Kibera? Are you trying to evict us? Are you giving this information to the government?
Is this so that they can tear down my house?
And we say, no. The idea is you would have access to this information yourselves, so you can actually have a proper discussion about the future of Kibera. That changed their perspective.
They mapped those 13 villages in about 3 weeks. Every person that walked around with a GPS created this skeleton of Kibera itself. When we animated the work that they'd done, everyone in the room was totally blown away.
Now that such a map is there, it can hold officials accountable so that we can tell them, look, here is a population of about 200,000 people with no facilities completely. What are you doing about it? In the second phase of mapping, we went a little bit deeper. We mapped education facilities, water and sanitation facilities, health facilities.
We had young girls that helped us map security.
Okay, but you don't want to be walking at night? Okay.
On the security map, we used tracing paper to say, okay, this place is dangerous, this place is not dangerous.
Like blue should be the more safe, red can be the less safe.
We had discussions saying, can you identify where women get raped?
It's not a safer place.
On the map, they're called black spots.
So can one person be the...
It's shocking how matter-of-fact they are about it. Like, it really is just a reality they live with every day.
After 6 months, you have seen one of the places that was mapped as being dangerous. Today, that place has a police post.
We used to be uninformed. Now we have all the information about Kibera. We are now informed.
When I saw the map for the first time, I was proud. This has not been done by other people, rather it has been done by me.
This technology is changing the way we look at the world. We're taking location-based understanding of anything on Earth and now making it almost touchable.
When you look at geography, you think, well, the world is not getting any bigger. We're not making any new land. And yet, every time I turn around, people are thinking up new ways to take advantage of maps.
We're in this together. We're in this, standing on this vast pillar of knowledge that's been built up by all of humanity over time.
Geography and science are going to make a difference. They're going to help governments make better decisions, help people learn things in new ways, help citizens understand their government and get involved. Let's go translations. Help save the world.
thank you for that. No, the video was really long, but I think it offered a good context for where we want to frame the discussion for today. So let me know if you're seeing my slides again.
Yes, we are.
All right, and I'll get into the presentation now. All right, so in terms of session objective, I want to basically bring you to what we'll go through in the next 20 minutes. Here you can see sustainable development. Key to us, I'm an urban planner by profession, is the pillars of sustainable development. They're always conflicting, and hopefully technology can be used to bring these conflicting pillars to a state of equilibrium, right? And this discussion is a good starting point for that discussion, right? Global context give you some insight into what the global IT infrastructure backbone is, some use cases, cutting edge, speak about the digital divide a little bit, and then give you how we use technology here in our organization. All right. I know questions is at the end, but if something is burning, Dacia, you can moderate and interrupt if needs be. All right. So first, these are the 4 pillars of sustainable development that we are accustomed to: environment, social, economic, governance. What I want to do here, and that was the reason for bringing that video, is to frame this into a social perspective, to speak about IT from the social dimension of it. The rankings below was how I separated, or how I see these different pillars of sustainable development, right? And the bullet points that are below are the SDGs that were identified, and I've ranked them. I will try to frame this discussion on the social pillar, sustainable development, but you always hit other pillars because they are inextricably linked. All right. So this is my slide in terms of global context. While doing my master's, I came across this in a research, and it was alarming to me that a small urban area such as Kingston was highlighted as one of, I think, 3 key areas that will be adversely or most impacted by rising global temperatures. Our footprint or population size or no metric would warrant such an analysis. But it was important to note here. I'm not sure if anybody can make out all the urban areas, but this is a map across the world. The slide on the left articulates all the urban centers that would be adversely affected, and it ranks it based upon the year. They'll expect to see something that they call climate migration. So the one on the right is, if you implement mitigative strategies now, you can curb the impact to a lesser extent, and it will show you the year. So Kingston by 2023, you are expected to be to see those impact, and with mitigative strategies, that timeline puts out to 2028. All right. Then from a IT standpoint, and this one is a paradox for me, because we know due to COVID have the phenomenon work from home. Ironically, the increased capacity for everyone working from home requires more cables. So although you're working remote, you still have somewhat of a footprint. And this is where the social dimension comes into play also. One of the key successes of any technological innovation is if it factors or caters to the cultural and attitudinal values of the targeted audience. So this discussion here is to look at how we can tackle the digital divide, but based upon this previous slide, all these urban areas, you can see to a larger extent, has some level of connectivity. What we want to also talk about is the unconnected, and what are some of the nuances, what are some of the reasons which attribute to this factor, and how do we combat that in light of COVID. So as you can see here, North America, Europe, even Asia, you have a lot of cables. Cables translate to communication. That's the backbone of the internet. That's how you communicate, all the Netflix, all these new worldly things. This is the infrastructure that facilitates same. All right. Let me go into use cases now. Smart cities. I'm an urban planner, and smart cities, how I look at it is, if you marry ICT, real estate, GIS, urban planning. That's really smart. I have a subsequent slide which explains that in depth, right? Disaster response. These are some of the new things that IT is facilitating. But if you're only connecting a certain percentage of the population, there are persons who are disenfranchised from this. If you look at the chart, it showed by 2020, you would have about 50 billion connected devices. And what that maps out to is about 6.58 connected devices per person in urban areas. What we want to discuss is the equity, how equitable internet access is available across the realm. Me, myself, right now in this present room, I have about 3 devices connected. So I'm guilty of that, but you have some persons who don't have a single connection, or communities who don't have connections, right? So how do we couple that? You have new things such as 5G, IoT, big data, AI, and blockchain. I'll just focus on the first 2 for this discussion in my subsequent arguments, but we can explore others. The last 2 is not my area of expertise per se, but it's cutting edge technology that's driving the force. And what I want to form here is, if we're making these advances in the areas that are connected, but we still have about 1 billion people who are not connected, meaning they have no form of connectivity due to either geographical limitations, finances, or just remoteness of areas. That's the aspect that we want to tackle, or I want to tackle in this forum today. And that's where the social dimension of this all comes out. All right. As you can see, somewhere between 2003 to 2007, we had more connected devices than people who living on Earth. So persons like me, we have multiple connected devices, while you have a lot of persons who are a lot of communities where there's not only, where there's no connected device. All right, smart cities, what it entails. I'll read this here because this definition came across really good for me. And there's also mention of the social infrastructure. All right, a city is smart when it manages to connect the physical infrastructure, the IT infrastructure, the social infrastructure, the business infrastructure to leverage the collective intelligence of the city. All right, and what you're looking here is a case study that I came across when I was studying, where in Switzerland, they have strategic ways of dealing with outputs of human activity. One is waste, or logistics, or transportation. And as you can see, they have a tiered structure in their urban environment. So you have conveyors, which carry things to a central processing facilities. You have hubs, you have buildings, and you have your different transport nodes. But look at the diagram in the lower corner. This is showing IoT at play, where if an ambulance going through a stoplight, the stoplight automatically recognizes that the ambulance and changes the suit. Where you have high-level vehicle, they're all connected on a G1, a wide area network scenario. So all aspects of your life is being connected or monitored per se, right? So that's the challenge. So here I would have focused solely on the urban realm where connectivity exists, but speaking about the digital divide, the remote areas, how do we get these areas connected is the issue at hand. And I will bring you to my slide first to show you how we deal with the former, meaning the urban areas, and then my subsequent slide will show you what we are doing as an entity, Digicel, as individuals, my colleague Glenn, as planners, to ensure that we play our part in connecting the unconnected, and show you some of the limitations that are there. So here you'll see a slide where disaster, after God, is something that we cannot plan for. We just need to have mitigative measures in place, right? So the top first screenshot is showing you during 2017 when 2 Category 5 hurricanes affected a lot of our markets, our countries, our neighbors, our Caribbean brothers. We use technology to go out and determine the extent of damage to the network. But said technology was also used to help recover and reinstate connectivity. That experience showed me personally that internet access is arguably now a basic need. Persons were interested more to be connected than water or electricity because there were rivers, there were generators or other mode that they could operate from, but connectivity was pivotal during that time. Take to the slide on the right. Now, this is a recent volcanic threat in St. Vincent, where data produced by UA, we would have taken that information, carried out some GIS processes, and overlay to see what segment of the customer base would be affected, what segment of our network would be affected or is at risk. So vulnerability assessment. Here we're cataloging damage in the third diagram on the right. This is down to the customer need. If a customer has an issue with the service, we're able to use the same technology to help restore access in short space of time. So that's dealing with the digitally connected. Let's speak to the unconnected now. And this is a slide, and it shows basically our spatial strategy, how I call it. And if you're Jamaican and you have some spatial awareness, you can recognize the middle diagram. It shows Kingston, Spanish-Town, Portmore, and what it's also showing is showing density. So the most dense areas, but it is showing the connected, because every dot that you're seeing represents a connection point. The inverse of that is persons who are not connected by our network, but that doesn't mean that there isn't some form of connection that exists. And when we speak about connectivity, we're speaking about two sources. You have wired lines and you have wireless. So if you get wireless connection, it's still considered. However, certain throughput is required for the modern day use cases, streaming, working from home, attending school remote, and that's the digital divide that we try to tackle, right? The top diagram is showing persons with service, without service, or persons who might want service. So we're drilling down to the customer level, to the building level, to ensure that where we provide service, everyone is able to get high-speed internet access from the facilities. And the last one is showing the type of connections that the different properties or different households in the market like, right? So we are taking a substantive approach to ensuring that where we provide service, we're very thorough in who is able to access. Now, let's speak about connectivity challenges. So this is the real digital divide. During a recent course, I found out that the government has to play a real critical role in ensuring that persons be connected, because it's not feasible for private entities, telcos, to provide 100% connection throughout all landmass due to the high cost of rollout and the maintenance that is required to service these networks. Private entities will only look at the commercially viable areas. Government needs to provide subsidy or de-risk or put some infrastructure in place according to World Bank and a study in order to ensure that remote areas, and we're talking rural, and we're talking geographically remote areas, also are connected. And that's one of the key pillars. Another one is financing and funding options. So multinationals are a source to ensure, especially in this new COVID climate where connectivity is now, as I said, a pivotal function that is needed in everyday life, right? Government can look financing and trickle that down to the utility providers, but you also have lack of spatial data, and this is the critical one and the title, because what we're finding, or what I'm finding out, is you don't have the information you need to respond as an entity to the end user needs. So taking from a social dimension, you go into communities, you have your roti diagram, or you do your focus group discussions to find out exactly what the end users require. Similar to the video that we would have shown, you would have seen where they utilize community members to map. And that data is a bottom-up approach which feeds into the decision-making process. So we need accurate spatial data to find out who wants to be connected, who currently don't have any form of connection, and that would help kind of bridge that digital divide. I raised this forum in a World Bank training, and it was something they were not looking at, because in the developed world, they're blessed with having open data and formal address system, while in the Caribbean, outside of urban areas, we don't even have a structured address system. So how can you connect somebody who doesn't have an address? I think the banking sector also faces a similar scenario where they're finding creative ways to open accounts for persons. And then the other one is you just have some areas that are remotely or geographically challenging to connect. So we'll have to accept those or look at former wireless connections to service those areas. Now my time is coming and I'm kind of closing off, but in order to bridge this digital divide, these are my recommendations. One, the government should utilize the opportunity and the budget for carrying out census. I think one is due shortly for Jamaica to map the unconnected. So when they survey households, they should find out what speed internet, who provider, if they have internet, if they want internet, and feed that data to private sector entities. And the private sector will respond where there's an opportunity, but that should be fed in a spatial manner so they can map and see the distribution of these potential targets to build a network. In Jamaica, we need a formal address system. It's something that if you live in an urban area, you're not affected by it, but the further you go outside of this urban realm, it's a huge challenge. For delivery, there are workarounds that we look at. The third one is you need more PPP. So government and private entities need to venture into arrangements or concessionary deals which favors the remote and rural areas so they can be connected. Another big one is government investment in infrastructure. That's the big key. All lines goes on poles, are they going underground ducts? So government need to ensure that these facilities are in place. Where new developments are being rolled out, it should be required, similar to roads, similar to sewage, similar to water, that connectivity is in place, especially in remote areas, right? I said regulatory amendments here, but I'd want to drill down. There needs to be more focus on the social dimension. A lot of times we as tech, we develop tech and think it's fit for the end user, but that's because of a lack of data. So I'm going to put the charge on you, Daisy and team, to get more socially relevant information in a spatial format so we can incorporate that in our models and our designs. And then I believe that we would develop products that suit the end user needs. All right. A lot of times I know the economic pillar or the governance and political pillar of sustainable development takes precedence over the social, and the environmental sometimes battle. But what you need to do is create that framework where all that data is already available, right? If a community wants to be connected, I know SDC does this a lot, do a survey, plot the number of houses that are there, the number of persons, the age group, and say, hey, this is the market. We want internet connection. How can we get it? Similar to what the residents in Africa did. So you notice those blind spots that they plotted, it eventually turned into a police post because it drove into policy. And that's what I meant when I said regulatory amendments. So with that said, that's my last slide. And I think I did it within the 45 minutes.
Excellent, you did, absolutely. Thank you so much for being succinct but interesting at the same time, and we hear the charge. So thank you so much, Mr. Dixon, for such an insightful presentation. We certainly see from at least a business perspective how spatial data is a great way to understand trends that relate directly to best or worst customer bases. We see where the use of GIS in monitoring and evaluation can improve the effectiveness of communications of results to management, funding partners, and beneficiaries. And we certainly see where maps and charts produced by GIS can help to reveal relationships, patterns, and trends in, for example, public health. We heard in the video about the recording of vectors that carry the H1N1 virus. So, and all of this tied to a dimension of monitoring and evaluation systems called surveillance. So we know we will be in touch because, like you said, the social dimensions are important. Everything is, we're moving towards kind of taking a multi-dimensional approach, but then it's so unfortunate that some dimensions get prioritized over others. And so in light of a theme that you highlighted earlier about equitable justice and equitability, I will be in touch with you regarding helping us to highlight the social dimensions of this aspect of sustainable development. So thank you again, very enlightening, and we will now open the floor to questions and answers. So we will invite persons from the audience to use the raise hand feature to pose questions to truly a master, Master Dixon. Okay, I see one question from Timson Green. How can the postal delivery system play a role in spatial digital mapping project? And the second question, will decisions be made or presented from a corporate setting and then shared with the government entities to benefit the country, or will it be the government agencies doing the research and then the corporate entities provide their expertise on best practices? So I think perhaps the second question would be in relation to what you were talking about in relation to the volcanic eruption. I don't know if Mr. Green, you can turn on, well, you can chip in here to just clarify what you meant. But in terms of the first question, Tarik,
I understand both asks. I understand both asks.
Cool.
All right, cool. So for the first one, right, the postal service had to play a pivotal role, but I think before then the national mapping entity has to also go in and do that level of assessment. So it's a joint effort between government entities, because one will be establishing these addresses and these postal systems. If you notice, the UK has a postcode, and I think Europe, while America has a zip code. So that level of demarcation needs to be done, but servicing those routes will be from the postal entity. So it has to be a joint collaborative effort, right? I did some research and I found out in rural areas, they have a system which I believe they call decametric, where what they do is they use the distance from the closest main road as your address. So once there's a main road and there's a number, that's the distance in whatever units to the house. So a postal person, once they reach on the road, they know in this distance, that's the house that they're servicing. So you have different dimensions that you can do to utilize that. And eventually it will happen, because every new developer that comes in with a development, they're putting in a road, they're naming the road, they're numbering the units. It's just dealing with the backlog or the remote areas and having a comprehensive system to govern that. As it relates for the second one, I'll give you an example before answering. There was a gentleman by the UA, I read this article. He takes public transport, but everybody have a smartphone and he could not find the bus stop information in Google Maps. He wrote to the government entity trying to offer his expertise to solve this problem. And bureaucratic and timelines never matured. So he went and developed it himself, had it uploaded to Google Maps, right? And then the JUTC followed after. So that's an example of a citizen taking the lead, taking the charge, and then there was an engagement with him, finding out how he went about this. And one of the biggest GIS platforms is called OpenStreetMap, right? It's free. They use it in Haiti to plot out everything post the earthquake. And how that started was a gentleman wanted to purchase a map, an entity. Either they never wanted to release the map or the cost was prohibitive. What he did, he rented a bicycle and he rode around the entire area, recording everything. And then he mapped it and put it out on the internet for free. And then persons just started contributing. So there's a huge part of GIS called PPGIS, which is public participation in GIS. And that's aligned with your social aspect. There's a close marriage between the two, right? So I would say it's a combination, but government needs to take charge because it has to be grounded in policy. It has to be budgeted for, and you have to think about the maintenance, but citizens can force the government hand by taking the initiative.
Okay, excellent. And yes, we are quite familiar with that. It's also a governance concept, participatory governance. And if you put that, or that intersects with data governance, it kind of reflects what you're describing. All right, so we have another question from Samoa Smith. How does Jamaica currently rank in the region as it relates to geospatial planning framework?
So as in terms of GIS, I can tell you we are the leaders in the Caribbean. And there was a research came out where we're top 25 in the world when it comes to GIS. In terms of the planning framework aspect of it now, that's where I believe we lack. There is an entity, a government entity called Land Information Council of Jamaica, and there's a National Spatial Data Management Division that's working on an actual document that will kind of put in that legislative piece. But totally there are bits and pieces mentioned in other legislation that these entities piggyback on, right? So to answer your question, regionally, we are leaders by a far, and we compete with some of the largest countries. Our professionals, our GIS professionals are all over the world doing great work.
Okay, that sounds very promising, but again, further to go, we have a question from Janelle. She says, since IT service providers will be gaining revenue from these countries, shouldn't they consider partnerships with the government in the march towards social justice? That is, shouldn't they make their services available to rural areas at a cheaper cost?
So one thing you have to look at when it comes to costs is building network is one cost, maintaining it is even a higher one. So if the area is rural and remote, imagine servicing that from your head office or your outside plant, right? Building the network also is one layer, but remember you have key infrastructure that needs to be in place. A lot of these rural areas are now just getting roads, as you can see by the road project. So if roads are not there, chances are, and then you need electrical poles. So it's a marriage that needs to be done, but there are always wireless options. It's just, it doesn't allow you to watch Netflix or it doesn't allow you to YouTube, but there are wireless options because you don't need that huge infrastructure outlay to bring that network to play. And remember, you have multiple providers. So you have an incumbent who would have had an island-wide network, right? And you have smaller players, because when you think about equitable, you have small cable and internet provider operators all over. It's just the big players might opt not to. And if they venture into these areas, the livelihoods of those small players will also go. So it's a balancing act.
Okay, thank you so very much. We have time for 2 more questions before Tarik has to leave. In the Q&A, we have a question: how can we educate Jamaicans on the importance of GIS to social life? Tell them to sign up for SALI 6023, and we get Mr. Dixon to come on every year. But yes, outside of the formal educational system, are there other things that Digicel is doing? For example, Tarik, I heard you said that you are working in close partnership with UE, because I know there's a branch of UE that deals with the GIS mapping and stuff like that. So tell us what in your opinion are ways we can improve or increase awareness of the importance of GIS in not just monitoring and evaluation, but just generally. When we were watching the documentary, we heard a number of the implementers or the community, the grassroots people saying, no, we're informed, no, data is driving our decision making, and all of these things are important when we're talking about monitoring and evaluation. So yes, how can we raise more awareness in that regard?
So let me give you a secret, right? You actually are contributing without even knowing. The beauty about GIS is you use it every day without knowing. So when you're heading home and you decide to take the shortest route, that's your mind making an analytical decision on the fly. But let me bring it first where now, when you use Google Maps and you say you are at this location and you want to go to work and you punch in work, when you arrive, Google does that calculation. Over time, if a couple people do that or you do that repeatedly, instantly you'll see Google start updating the business place or the office location on the map. So you're actually feeding a lot of that data to Google. It's being crowdsourced, right? Without you even knowing on the fly. So eventually the importance or the relevance will be reached. It's just timely. And hidden gems, I'll bring you to the huge social media platforms. When you go on Instagram and you tag your location, so if you go to Reggae Falls or you go to those rural areas, that's GIS and that's you kind of increasing awareness through social media. Facebook has the same thing. WhatsApp, when you go and you press share your location. So just your normal mode of operation, you're actually adding and contributing without even knowing, right? That's the biggest one. In terms of public education now, you have key entities, LICJ, NSDMD, but you know should become an advocate for change. So I came here on this forum to spread the word. You'll go back to YouTube, go back to YouTube, watch those videos, and then you can share and kind of pass on that knowledge.
Okay, again, serving as direct participants in the process of raising awareness. Thank you so much, Tarik. There is a question I have in relation from a more criminological perspective. Because, you know, there is kind of, just like how we have reservations about taking the vaccine because we're not so informed. And of course, there's this idea that, you know, too much information, you know, questions about data privacy and protection and all of these things. What would you say to somebody who has reservations about using or participating directly in these things? You know, like when I went to St. Kitts, I had Google Maps on. It pick up my location and say I must rate the hotel that I was staying at, and it was asking me to broadcast it to everybody so that they can benefit from my ratings. So what would you say to persons who have reservations about, you know, just freely giving information like that?
So it's twofold, right? It's like oxygen. It's almost ubiquitous now, where if you're benefiting from it, you have a duty to contribute. So if you don't have a smartphone and you remain with your analog phone and you don't use Google Maps to get anywhere, then I can understand your perspective. But if you want to benefit from the luxury of this technology, you have to do a cost benefit analysis to see if the value added outweighs you know, the concern. Because one of the biggest thing is I read an article and they were looking at what are some of the shortfalls of GPS and GNSS and all those navigation. And the biggest one was it prevents places from being discovered. You remember that journey that you would have to go and figure it out, and you had to stop here and ask John Brown how far? Yeah, because it brings you right to your direction, to your destination. So there are concerns, and you have GDPR, and you have certain legislative data protection that's governing it. But if you think about it, no GIS system asking you your blood type, asking you your name is always optional. The most things it wants is things that's already available in the public domain. This building, what's this building? Where do you work? But if I did a search at NLA, I can get the ownership information. It's already available. It's just making it a lot more accessible. So you would have to do that assessment just to answer you. There are certain things that need to be hidden, and you have the risk of data breach there. That's always threatening us. So I would say create a digital image. That username on your social media account is good, and keep your official government name to yourself, your date of birth, and create like a avatar of you online and utilize that.
And with that final recommendation, I think we will end today's session. I saw Janelle's comment about privacy, citizen privacy, but I believe Mr. Dixon addressed that adequately. And so with that recommendation, we will end today's session. So thank you everyone for joining today's masterclass. Thanks to our presenter, Tarik Dixon, the IT team led by Richard Leach, and to all our participants. We encourage you to follow us on Salisis Mona on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook for updates of upcoming events in relation to FSS at 60. Thank you so very much. Have a good evening. Thank you again, Tarik Dixon, Head of GIS Network and Design Operations for the Digicel Group. Have a good evening. Cheers. Bye.